So finally the domino has fallen. Everyone just breathe a nice deep sigh of relief. Enjoy! Hi, my name's Kimmy and I talk about Formula One in the world's second worst English speaking accent. And I don't know about you, but I'm very happy this morning. Now, if you're not down for a completely unscripted video, then I recommend you tune out now because I didn't really feel like writing a script today. And I have no idea how long this is going to be and exactly how much I'm going to ramble. But let's talk about some basic topics. So number one, obviously, the big news of the last few hours is that Carlos Sainz has finally put pen to paper and signed on the dotted line with Williams. The second thing is Checo. Yeah. Let's start with Sainz, shall we? So obviously, like, considering I basically did a massive sales pitch for Carlos Sainz to convince him to go to Williams, I am very, very happy that this has been the final outcome. And I've seen a lot of hate online. I've seen a lot of people saying that he deserves better. And like, here's the thing. Carlos was a victim of very bad timing, right? And I don't think that Ferrari would have signed anybody other than Lewis Hamilton or, like, let's be honest, Max Verstappen in that seat. So, and of course that bad timing essentially ended in him having a very limited number of options. And if you kind of look at it objectively, in my opinion, the best option out of all of those was hands down Williams. I don't think that there was really any competition, in my opinion, based on what Carlos himself has said about what his priorities are for a team as to who his best pick was going to be. I think it was just a matter of whether or not he could nail down the conditions that he wanted to make sure that it really was going to be the right fit for him. And of course that means we need to talk about Audi / Sauber and Alpine and why they weren't potentially the right fit. Now, based off basically everything that Sainz has been saying over the last few months about his priorities in a team and what's happened the last few weeks in both Alpine and Sauber, I'm not calling them all that. We're just going to call them Sauber, okay? I don't think all of that chaos in those teams has really endeared them to a man who has been very clear saying he wants a team that will provide him with stability and a home and somewhere he feels comfortable and loved. Like, when you look at all of these upper level management changes that are going on at these other two teams, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot barge pole, would you? Like, I frankly feel really bad for people like Jack Doohan, who I think is probably going to end up in that Alpine seat because his first experience with driving full-time in Formula One is going to be that clusterfuck. Yeah. I mean, they might not pick Jack. I think that based on how much Jack has been doing in the simulator, how much Alpine has been pushing him in... I live right on the main road. There are ambulances and police cars that go past me all the time. But based on how much Alpine has really ingratiated Jack into the whole F1 ecosystem, so not just within their team, but with his appearances on F1 TV, which, by the way, he absolutely kills at. Like, I will miss Jack on F1 TV if he does get a full-time seat, but, you know, full-time seat, awesome. But yeah, Alpine has certainly been making sure they're allowing Jack to kind of weave himself into that F1 ecosystem in ways that are more than just his participation in the team and the amount of work that he puts in the simulator every weekend. So I'm fairly confident that Jack's going to be in that Alpine seat now that Carlos has given them the middle finger and said, no thanks. Thank God. Carlos Sainz working with Flavio Briatore. That would have been interesting. It's two very polar opposite personalities, I think would be a good way to describe that. You know, my first memories of Flavio are back when I was a teenager in probably it would have been the early 2000s. I wasn't really following Formula One at the time. I'm talking like 2002-ish, and seeing him in all of the gossip magazines like, you know, Hello and what were they all called? NW, I think was one of them. Yeah, seeing him all in all of those gossip magazines because he was Heidi Klum's partner. that was my first memory of Flavio, and not a good one. Yeah, back in the days when I used to read gossip magazines, holy mother, I have changed as a person. I think that's something that people need to remember sometimes, is that people change, and gossip rags, yeah, wow. And then we come to Sauber, who I think are just kind of stuck in a bit of limbo. They're just waiting, really, for Audi to come along, and then the question is, okay, well, do we just keep Valtteri, or do we keep Guan Yu? Like, obviously, out of the two of them, Valtteri is the smarter choice from a performance standpoint, but if their car has no hope in hell of performing, then chances are they'll probably want to take the Guan Yu money. We'll talk more about that in a minute when we talk about Checo. Or do you look elsewhere? So who has lost their seat? Already confirmed, we know that Kevin Magnussen has lost his seat. We know that Logan Sargent has lost his seat. Now, look, let's be clear, Logan Sargent is not getting rehired. He will not find anywhere on the grid. I don't even think as a reserve driver. That's not just based on performance, but based on vibes. I've seen a lot of people out there in the last few hours who have been like, poor Logan, it's so unfair on him. No, sorry. What is wrong with you? I know he's had some situations this year where he has not been in an equal car to Alex, but you can't tell me that he deserves to continue on the grid. You just can't. Like, after seeing, like, what? I know what it's like. I know what it's like to like a driver and to want them on the grid. I like Daniel Ricciardo. Do I think that he deserves a seat at Red Bull over Yuki Tsunoda? No. Do I understand why he was in that conversation rather than Yuki? Yes. Did I think that he deserved to continue after that year at McLaren? Absolutely not. Did I agree with the way that it went down? No. So a lot of people have kind of been criticising the way that this whole thing with Logan went down. I don't think he was under any illusions that he was going to be continuing with that team in 2025. Like, I'm sorry. I know that publicly it has been it's Logan's seat to lose, but I think the writing has been on the wall there since the middle of last year, and I don't think that he thought that he would be continuing. I don't think anybody in that team thought that he would be continuing, and I think that partially that is the team and James Vale's fault for allowing everyone out there to think he had a chance at continuing on at that team. I don't think that was ever something that was on the cards. So that is on them. They probably had a reason behind why they did it. I think it was kind of wrong, but at the same time, like, if you haven't got a confirmed driver, what are you gonna do? Right, back to the original point. Options out there for Sauber. So, because I think it's pretty clear at this point, right, that Kimi Antonelli is getting the Mercedes seat. Is anyone still debating that? No. Okay, moving on. Sauber, Kevin Magnussen, maybe, I'm pretty sure that K-Mag's checked out. Like, that interview that he did with, I think it was with Lawrence Burrito, a few weeks ago, he very much seemed resigned to the fact that he would not be on the grid next year, even though it hadn't been officially announced at that point that he would not be continuing with Haas, so I don't think K-Mag is in that conversation. As I said, I don't think Logan Sargent is in that conversation. Daniel Ricciardo has made it pretty clear that for him it's Red Bull or bust. However, if that or bust actually does come to fruition, I would not be surprised if he's at least had a conversation. Although I suppose at the same time, at the moment, Sauber's kind of stuck in this limbo period. Oh no, he starts in like 2 days. I'm like going, when does Binotto start? The 1st of August. August is in 2 days. Holy shit. You know what that means? It means it's a month and a half until I go to Singapore. Which is why I don't currently have the heat on in my house, because I'm cheap. And I need to pay for a very expensive hotel room that's not very big. So yeah, Daniel Ricciardo has said Red Bull or bust. It's looking more and more like or bust, although we'll get into that conversation in a minute with regards to what's going on over there at Red Bull and B-Carb. Who knows? And then the only other two drivers that are at risk are their existing drivers, in Zhou and Bottas. What do I think is going to happen? Honestly, I think they're going to take Lawson. Yeah. And I don't think that that's going to be a big loss for Red Bull. Like, I rate the guy. Like, I'm not saying I think that he's a mid driver. I think that Liam Lawson has the potential to be a very good Formula One driver. I think that if Red Bull does let him go, then they need to start moving really, really quickly with Isaac Hadjar, because the reality is Max is not going to be around after 2028 and possibly not after 2026. And Red Bull needs to have a succession plan in place, ready to be their next prodigal young talent. And they don't have a lot going on at the moment. I know there's been a lot of conversation around Arben Lindblad. I mean, he's still F3. Realistically, their only options in the next 12 months to go into either seat is Lawson or Hadjar. So either they need to negotiate a loan deal for Lawson, which I have mentioned before, to loan him to Sauber like they did with Carlos Sainz to Renault back in 2017, and I know I've said this before. I am aware that there was an engine deal in place back then and there is not anymore. However, negotiations can be had, especially if Red Bull is footing the bill. They either need to loan Lawson to Sauber for 12 months and then give them the opportunity to secure a more permanent solution come 2026 with new regs. Obviously it could also be Alpine, however I don't see Alpine taking on another team's junior driver when they've got their own junior driver sitting there who's been doing such a good job for them and behind the scenes. I think that would be a really bad form and leave a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, which is only going to kind of exacerbate the negative impression that most people have of that team at the moment anyway. So I think that really the best option for Sauber right now is to just take Lawson for on a 1-year contract. And whether that's just a regular Red Bull lets him go, or if there is some kind of loan deal with an associated payment, that would make sense. But yeah, I just kind of feel like Valtteri's kind of done. I know he's been talking about his future, and I know that he's been talking about the fact that he's spoken to Carlos about why it's been taking him so long to make that decision. But Valtteri's kind of whole aura this year has felt like he's kind of ready to get off the merry-go-round. And Zhou Guanyu, as much as I really like the guy, performance, does his money justify the performance? Well, I guess that depends on how much the money is, which of course none of us know. So yeah, that was a detour and a half. Anyway, back to the original point at hand. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, teammates at Williams. I am trying so hard not to have the biggest grin on my face. I am so happy. Oh, fuck it. I am so happy about this pairing. I am chuffed to bits. There's been a lot of chatter about who's going to be the number 1 and who's going to be the number 2, and I'm not entirely sure that that team is going to go in that direction, at least not unless there is a clear indication of who is who. This is not an Albon Latifi or an Albon Sargent situation, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see where Sainz slots in that dynamic. Overall, they're two very likable people. They both seem like kind of a little bit goofy, a little bit fun, definitely kind of weird nerds that I'm always going to lean towards a weird nerd because I'm a weird nerd. Yeah, I think that they're going to be either very equal or Sainz is going to be a little bit further ahead than Alex. No shade on Alex, because I think Alex has done an absolutely phenomenal job of dragging that car around and managing to score a few points here and there. Alex will kind of like slot into that default number 2 driver by the middle of the season, I think. Even though he is what the project is built around right now, I do kind of see those two working very well together as a team and moving the whole project forward, rather than what you kind of see in Red Bull, where obviously it's not so much that the car is and the project is obviously around Max, but the car itself, it's not necessarily built for Max. They're just trying to build the fastest car, and Max just so happens to be that talented that he can manage to get it around a circuit. That's not going to be the case in Williams, I don't think. I think that's going to be a much more collaborative kind of environment. I think that's kind of the point as to why James Vowles was chasing after Carlos Sainz so much. because he does have such a good track record of moving teams forward. And I know there's a lot of people out there who go, the drivers don't develop the cars, the engineers do. The engineers have to take on the feedback from the drivers because the engineers can't get in the car and actually physically drive it, right? So no, the driver doesn't sit there like at a computer with a CAD software program open, drawing up aerodynamic parts. Obviously, that's not their job, but their job is to make sure that they're providing that quality, well-rounded feedback that is specific and informative so that engineers, aerodynamicists, mechanics can work toward improving the issues, the inherent issues in the car and what makes it feel unbalanced, what makes it feel a little bit unstable in the corners, what makes it bounce on the straights. There's only so much feedback you can get from sensor data. At a certain point, it comes down to somebody physically sitting in a car, driving it around a track and saying, here's all the minute little things that I felt while I was tuning in, while I was putting the power down. Like, you can kind of tell F1 fans who don't really enjoy driving. I'll put it that way. I think if you enjoy driving, it's easier to understand how a driver can provide feedback to improve a car, because if you enjoy driving, you're paying attention to all these little things in your car. Some people, they get in their little Toyota Corolla or their friggin' Nissan Juke or any other number of hideous cars, and it's an A to B thing for them. They don't get in the car and actually physically enjoy driving it and understand and feel how that car drives. Like if you were starting to get a bit of a slow puncture and your tyre was going a bit flat, there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't feel that. They wouldn't feel when they needed to take the car in to get a wheel balance. They wouldn't feel when one of the cylinders was just not quite firing properly. A lot of people don't notice those things. And I think the Formula One fan who says that a driver isn't inherently involved with car development and providing quality feedback to ensure that the car is moving forward is the kind of person who doesn't actually understand what a car feels like when it's nice to drive, or understand what it feels like when their car needs a service, or understand what it feels like when there's something catastrophically wrong with their car and it desperately needs to go to a mechanic. And look, there's no shade on anyone out there who is an A to B person in the car and doesn't feel all these little things in a car. I think you probably should consider it, because quite often those kind of people are also the ones who don't know how to indicate correctly at a roundabout. But, you know, yeah. Car development. Drivers are important. That was my point. But I think, yeah, Alex and Carlos, they both seem like they're very beneficial members of a team. They both seem very hardworking. They both just seem like very personable people who ingratiate themselves to the entirety of the team and not just the key stakeholders, you know, which I think is important for a team culture perspective. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you want the whole team to get behind you, then you need to be just as interested in the person who makes your coffees photos of their nieces and nephews as you are, like, making sure that you're, like, getting on well with your boss, right? Like, this is a balance thing. Ooh. This video is going to be basically impossible to cut because I have not kept a steady train of thought at all. Yeah, so overall, Alex and Carlos, chuffed to bits. Glad I called it. Wish I called it at the start of the year, because I really was fully on that Carlos to Audi train. I was really looking forward to seeing him and Hulkenberg back in a team together. I thought that they were a really great, interesting dynamic. Certainly not mad about Williams. Pretty chuffed to bits, let's be honest. Oh, it's exciting. Right, so Checo. I'm just gonna check just quickly. I'm just gonna refresh the F1 official F1 website, and there's a reason behind that. So it came out this morning that Checo is not being dropped mid-season after everybody thought that he would be. And last night, Biz and I were having a conversation about this, and he was fully on the train of thought that they have to get rid of him. I was on the fence and said I could, because I still, last night I thought it could go either way, but I was leaning more towards them retaining Checo. This report says they have, And the reason why I say this report says they have is because there has not actually been an official statement yet. And until I see that official statement and that it pops up on the official F1 website saying that Checo is being retained, I will not quite believe it. And here's why. Even though I was leaning towards them retaining Checo for a very specific reason, which I've spoken about in a previous video. But the quote is, a Red Bull spokesperson confirmed Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver despite recent speculation, and we look forward to seeing him perform at tracks he has previously excelled at after the summer break. Now, a Red Bull spokesperson, from what I gather, is not actually any kind of official statement. It is information that has come from inside the Red Bull factory, based on what Christian Horner announced to the staff at the factory. Now, some important things to note about that. Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver. Yes, Red Bull Racing is the Red Bull Racing team. However, sometimes that is also referred to as anybody who is a Red Bull driver from either team, whether that be a full-time driver at Red Bull Racing, at VCARB, or a reserve. So, whilst yes, it does appear that Checo is staying at the top team next to Max, I'm not going to fully believe that until I see that on a website that is not like Planet F1, right? Or Autosport. I want to see it on the official F1 news website. Then I will believe it. Now, why did they keep Checo? It fundamentally, in my belief, comes down to numbers. And those numbers are not numbers on a leaderboard. They are numbers on a balance sheet. And a lot has been made recently about pressure being put on the top brass at Red Bull from people within the team about Checo's lack of performance affecting their place in the Constructors' Championship and potentially their staff bonuses. Now that's a big problem, because that kind of morale loss when people are losing thousands of dollars because one person isn't pulling their weight is not good. How does Red Bull counterbalance this? Well, they pay out the same bonuses regardless of their position in the championship and base it only on Max's position. That's how they counterbalance it. So they need to look at whether or not Max wins the Drivers' Championship rather than whether or not Red Bull wins the Constructors' Championship. Second problem, those bonuses are probably tied to bonuses that are paid from their major sponsors. If they lose the Constructors' Championship, then those bonuses that are coming from sponsors will not be as high. Therefore, any payments made to the staff that are over and above what they should be for the Constructors' Championship position, should Red Bull not finish first, will be coming out of pocket. What I'm trying to say here are basically the downsides to retaining Checo. There's a few things. One, there is the fact that they potentially might have to pay out team bonuses out of pocket because the team is unhappy about missing their bonuses because of one person's lack of performance. I would argue to say that their inability to build a car that more than one person can drive is probably part of the reason, but we'll gloss over that. Number two is the reduction in bonus payments from, or maybe entirely lack of bonus payments from their major sponsors, because those certainly are tied to Constructors' Championship. The approximately like 10 to 14 million US dollars that they will not get in prize money per position. So say for argument's sake they get jumped by both McLaren and Ferrari, that'll be 20 to 30 odd million. And then let's not also forget the amount of money Checo has cost them in repair bills, which so far is estimated to be around about $5 million. Okay, so those are the four main things that the team needs to consider as to why they might not want to retain Checo. Why they would want to retain Checo, however, is obviously his sponsorship money, his merchandise sales, whether or not they can get out of those sponsorship deals, because let's be honest, getting out of a sponsorship deal mid-season is probably pretty goddamn hard, and then whether or not they need to pay Checo out of his contract. Now, I imagine that this new 1+1 contract that he signed for 2025, 2026, probably, you know that performance clause that everybody was talking about? I would say that probably that performance clause actually relates to whether or not that contract will be valid come 2025. So they're letting him stay for now, but if he doesn't sort his shit out, then that contract for next year will be ripped up and thrown in the bin. But getting him out mid-season out of a contract when he is somebody that comes with such a large amount of money, that is not going to be easy. So at the end of the day, you put all of these figures into a dirty great big spreadsheet and go, okay, what's the number? And I would say that probably that number is still significantly higher if they keep him. And I think that's why they have. I don't think it's really got anything to do with performance. I think it's mostly to do with money. And that's something that I've already said before in another video when he signed his new contract that I don't think will be valid. But yeah. So what happens at Red Bull? So there's still talk about whether or not this test that they've got happening. Where is it? Is it it's not Imola, is it? I don't know where's this test. I don't know. This test that Red Bull is doing, this filming day, is going to be a shootout between Ricciardo and Lawson about who gets the V-carb seat next year, and or even for the rest of the season. I don't see them dropping Daniel at this stage. Now that I've said it, they'll drop Daniel. I don't see them dropping him just because he has been, his performances have improved, and fundamentally I think that he is still the smart choice to go into the Red Bull seat next to Max if Checo does have his contract cancelled for next year. And the reason behind that is the same as what everyone else has already said. He's a known quantity. He probably will still hit the ground running in that car because he is familiar with the way that it operates. No, he hasn't driven that exact car for more than the RB19, last year's car, for more than a few laps around Silverstone, but fundamentally they know that he can handle the car, and he can also handle being Max's mate. I don't think it's fair to do what they did with Pierre and Alex and put a rookie directly into that seat next to Max. And I know that it is a good way to see if people sink or swim, but it's also a really great way to make somebody who's very good look very bad. And that is what happened with Pierre and Alex. They were rookies who were put into a seat right next to Max. Neither of them are bad drivers by any means. They're both very, very talented and have performed admirably in pretty terrible cars recently. And Red Bull threw them in the bin because they got absolutely demolished by Max. Now, Daniel might also get absolutely demolished by Max. I don't think he will get demolished as much as Checo has been because Max and Daniel's driving style is far more aligned than Max and Checo's driving style. However, if Daniel is getting demolished by Max, I think that he'll just take that on the chin. And also because he's been there, done that, and he's already been through the trauma of trying to be number one in that garage next to Max Verstappen, and it didn't end well, I think that he's not going to be under any illusions that Max is the priority there. If there is a team order situation, if somehow Daniel Ricciardo is leading a race and Max is coming up on him, he'll just switch. Even if he's 2 laps from the end, he will switch. I think we'll go, okay, Daniel, let's get you your first win in how many years? Holy mother, 2021 Monza, wow, okay. And that was a fluke. Sorry, Daniel. I still like you, but it was a fluke. Yeah, if they have the opportunity, they'll let him have a win and say, okay, Daniel, you've had your win. Now we need you to just sit behind Max and play rear gunner. And I don't think he'll argue that point. If they want Max to get a 5th world title, because I think, even though I am not one of these people who thinks that it is impossible for Lando to still win this year. I think it is entirely possible for Lando to still win this year. Yes, I believe it would be the largest points deficit ever to have been overcome. However, there's more races this year. And that Red Bull is taking a pretty steep nosedive. But fundamentally, I think it's going to end up being very similar to what happened with Brawn in 2009, which is that whole come out of the gate relatively fast, tail off at the end and just hang on by the skin of your teeth. I think that's going to be the situation with Max. So yeah, I think if they want Max to get a 5th world championship next year, Daniel Ricciardo is the right person to put in that seat. Does he deserve it? Probably not. You don't need to like it, but it does just kind of make logical sense. It's the pragmatic choice. And you're not going to potentially utterly destroy a rookie's entire career by sticking them in next to Max and having them fail. Yeah. Wow, that went on for a bit, didn't it? Sorry about that. So yeah, there's my thoughts on all of that. Final thoughts, George. My father-in-law is heartbroken, as you can imagine, because he is a very, very large George Russell fan, which is difficult when I have conversations with Gray about Formula One, because I am not a George Russell fan. I'll just leave that at that. So yeah, he's having a mental breakdown, and I'm kind of like, okay, cool. They broke the rules. It's as simple as that. You break the rules, you get disqualified. We've seen it with plenty of cars in the past. We saw it last year with Lewis and Charles. You break the rules, you get disqualified. It's as simple as that. I think probably what happened is that as George was pulling in to Parc Ferme, somebody at Mercedes went, oh shit, that's right, there's no in-lap. We can't pick up any marbles, and I think they then tried to pull a bit of a Swiftie with not fully draining the tank, because let's be honest, it's a little bit sus that the car weight was exactly the minimum weight limit before it was discovered by the scrutineers that it hadn't been fully drained. I'm not making any allegations here, but that information is freely available to anybody who looks it up. That's just an observation that I am making based on the publicly available information. Just seems a little bit coincidental to me, you know? Anyway, what do you guys think? Do you think that Sainz to Williams is great? Do you think it's awful? Do you think he should have taken a year off? Do you think he should have gone to Audi? Do you think that he should just forget about the whole thing and go rallying? Tell me what you think down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Please make sure you click the like button, click the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. I will, down in the description box, put a link to my hot takes hotline. If you want to share any of your F1 hot takes, please do jump onto that Google form, fill it out, send it through, and I will correlate everything and put them into a video some point in the future when I have somebody actually fill it out and it doesn't just remain completely empty. Yeah, so I don't have really much of a final word to say today, other than I am I'm just chuffed to bits, really.